Admiral James Stone stood at the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Thunder, his gray eyes fixed on the massive Imperial vessel hanging in space before them. The ship was beautiful in a strange way, all smooth curves and gleaming metal, nearly twice the size of humanity's largest vessel. But Stone wasn't fooled by pretty things. 20 years in space had taught him that beauty often hid danger. "They're hailing us again, sir," said Officer Mike Wells, his fingers hovering over the communication panel. Same frequency as before. Stone straightened his uniform and nodded. Put them through. He had hoped this day would go differently. Humanity's first contact with the Galactic Empire should have been a moment of celebration, not this tense standoff. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Imperial ambassador. The alien had chosen to call himself Marcus, claiming his real name would be unpronounceable to humans. He looked almost human, except for his silver skin and completely black eyes. His expression showed the same arrogant smile he'd worn throughout their talks. "Admiral Stone," Marcus said, his voice smooth but cold. "Have you reconsidered our generous offer?" Stone's jaw tightened. "Our answer remains the same, Ambassador. Earth and its colonies will not submit to Imperial rule. We are willing to discuss peaceful trade and cultural exchange, but we will not give up our independence." Marcus laughed, the sound like ice cracking. "Admiral, you don't seem to understand. The Empire has conquered over 3,000 species. Some were more advanced than humans, others more numerous. All of them now serve the Empire faithfully." "Then you've never met humans before," Stone replied calmly. "We're different." Yes, every species claims to be different." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Some fought for days, others for weeks. A few particularly stubborn races lasted almost a month. But the result is always the same." Stone leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "Ambassador, I'm trying to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. You've seen only a fraction of our military capability. We've spent thousands of years fighting amongst ourselves. We've learned lessons your empire never had to learn." "Threats?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "From a species that barely learned to leave their planet a century ago." "Not threats. Warnings." Stone's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. "Humanity isn't like the other races you've conquered. We don't have a single military command to defeat. Every human colony, every settlement, even individual ships are trained to fight independently. You won't be fighting an army. You'll be fighting millions of separate resistance cells, each with their own tactics." The ambassador's smile finally faltered, just for a moment. "You speak as if you have a choice, Admiral. The Empire does not leave potential threats unconquered. You have 6 hours to begin your surrender process, or we will demonstrate why the Empire has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years." Stone shook his head slowly. "And you have 6 hours to leave human space, Ambassador. After that, whatever happens will be on your head. We've studied your tactics, your strategies. You rely too much on central command, on overwhelming force. That works against unified armies. But humans..." He allowed himself a small smile. "We're chaos incarnate." The ambassador's face twisted in anger. "You dare." "End transmission," Stone ordered, and Marcus's face disappeared from the screen. Officer Wells looked up from his station. "Sir, do you think they'll really attack?" "They will." Stone turned to look at the crew, men and women who represented humanity's best. "Send the coded signal to all Earth Defense Forces. Operation Scattered Storm is now in effect. Tell every ship captain they're free to execute their predetermined missions the moment the Empire shows hostility." "Yes, sir." Wells paused. "Sir, do you think we can win?" Stone walked to the viewport, watching as the Imperial ship's lights pulsed in the darkness of space. "Officer Wells, the Empire thinks they're going to war against Earth. Their mistake is not realizing they're going to war against humans." He turned back to his crew, his voice firm with conviction. "And humans don't know how to lose. As if in response to his words, alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the ship. The Empire had made their choice. The war for humanity's freedom was about to begin. 3 Imperial warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Mars, their massive hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Each ship was 5 miles long, bristling with weapons that could reduce a planet to ash. To the Empire, this was a small force, enough to handle what they considered a minor rebellion. Commander Anna Reed watched them from her small fleet of 30 Earth ships hiding in the asteroid belt. Her vessels were tiny compared to the Imperial warships, but she smiled anyway. The Empire was about to learn an expensive lesson. All ships maintain radio silence. She whispered into her command mic. Remember your training. Hit and run. Don't try to be heroes. She checked her tactical display one last time. Operation Mosquito starts in 3 minutes. The Imperial ships moved forward with perfect formation, their sensors scanning for Earth's main fleet. They expected to find a unified defense force protecting Mars' colony. Instead, they found nothing. Status report demanded Imperial Captain First Class Vale from his flagship's bridge. Where are their defensive forces? No large military formations detected, sir, his sensor officer reported. Only civilian traffic. Wait. The officer frowned. Sir, the civilian ships are moving in unusual patterns. Vale's eyes narrowed. Unusual how? Before the officer could answer, dozens of civilian ships suddenly changed course. They weren't the clumsy cargo vessels they appeared to be. They were military ships in disguise, and they had been waiting. Incoming fire, the sensor officer shouted. Vale laughed. Return fire with main batteries. Crush these primitives. But the Earth ships didn't behave like any enemy the Empire had faced before. Instead of forming battle lines, they scattered in all directions. Each ship followed its own random course, making it impossible to predict their movements. Commander Reed's voice crackled across all Earth frequencies. Phase 1. Execute. From behind asteroids and hidden stations, hundreds of small drones launched. They were simple machines, barely bigger than a car, each carrying a single missile. The Empire's advanced shields were designed to stop powerful energy weapons, not the crude kinetic weapons humanity preferred. Minor impacts across all sectors, Vale's shield officer reported dismissively. Then his eyes widened. Sir, the projectiles, they're carrying nuclear payloads. Vale stood up in shock. What primitive species uses nuclear weapons in space combat? The answer came in the form of 30 synchronized nuclear explosions. The Empire's shields, optimized for energy weapons, couldn't handle the combination of radiation, heat, and physical shock. Massive holes appeared in their defensive screens. Phase 2. Reed commanded. The scattered Earth ships struck from all directions at once. They didn't try to destroy the Imperial vessels. Instead, they targeted specific systems with surgical precision. Engines, weapon ports, sensor arrays, anything that could be damaged through the gaps in their shields. This is impossible, Vale shouted as his ship shuddered. They're not following any known combat doctrine. Each ship is fighting independently. Reed's voice came over their communication channels. We tried to warn you. Humans don't fight like your other conquered species. We don't rely on central command. Every captain is trained to think independently, to adapt, to find weaknesses. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, 2 Imperial warships were crippled, their engines destroyed and weapons offline. The third barely managed to escape into faster-than-light travel, its hull scared and burning. Back on her bridge, Reed looked at the tactical display showing the disabled Imperial ships. Send the rescue shuttles, she ordered. Let's show them another thing about humans. We take care of our prisoners. As her crew carry out their orders, Reed recorded a message for Earth Command. First engagement successful. The Empire's ships are more advanced, but their tactics are predictable. They fight like an empire. Rigid, inflexible, arrogant. We fight like humans. Adaptive, creative, and impossible to predict. They're not ready for this kind of war. She looked out at the stars, knowing this was just the beginning. The Empire would send more ships, bigger ships. But now they would come with doubt in their minds, because humanity had just done what no species had managed in 10,000 years. They had bloodied the Empire's nose. And they were just getting started. High Commander Rex stood before the Imperial War Council, his silver skin reflecting the dim light of the chamber. The defeat at Mars had been embarrassing, but now he would show these humans what real Imperial power looked like. "The primary battle fleet is ready," he announced to the gathered admirals. 1,000 warships, our finest crews. We will crush these primitives in a single swift strike. On the other side of human space, Admiral Stone received the news of the incoming fleet with unusual calmness. "How many civilian ships have been converted for combat?" he asked his staff. "Over 10,000 fishing vessels and cargo ships have been fitted with weapons, sir," Officer Wells reported. "Each captain has been given full autonomy to fight as they see fit." Stone nodded. "And the ground preparations? Earth's armies have split into small units, hiding in every type of terrain we have. Mountains, forests, deserts, underwater bases, even the Arctic has combat teams ready. The colonies on Mars and Venus have done the same." The massive Imperial fleet arrived 3 days later, emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. High Commander Rex smiled at the sight of Earth hanging in space before him. Soon, this troublesome world would learn its place. "Launch the first wave," he ordered. "Show them what real power looks like." 300 Imperial ships descended toward Earth. They expected to find major cities to target, military bases to destroy. Instead, they found empty streets and abandoned bases. The humans had scattered, leaving behind only traps and decoys. In the Rocky Mountains, a team of 50 soldiers led by Captain Lisa Brown watched the Imperial ships pass overhead. "Remember," she told her people, "we don't need to win. We just need to make them bleed." Her team was one of thousands spread across Earth. As the Imperial ships tried to establish control, these small units struck from hiding. They destroyed landing parties, ambushed patrols, and vanished before the Empire could respond. "This is madness," Rex shouted as reports flooded in. "How can they have resistance cells everywhere? There's no central command to target." The Empire had never faced an enemy like this. When they conquered other worlds, they would destroy the main armies and government centers, and resistance would crumble. But humans had prepared for this war differently. In orbit, civilian fishing boats turned warships harassed Imperial vessels. On Mars, mining crews used their equipment to collapse the ground under Imperial landing zones. On Venus, atmospheric pilots led Imperial ships into storms that tore them apart. "Sir," Rex's aide reported, "we've lost contact with another 60 ships. The humans, they're not trying to defeat us. They're just bleeding us with thousands of small cuts." Rex watched the tactical display in growing horror. His ships were scattered across the solar system, chasing an enemy that refused to stand and fight. Every time they cornered human forces, they would find only empty buildings rigged to explode or automated drones programmed to waste Imperial resources. On Earth, Admiral Stone received hourly updates of the fighting. "Send word to all commands," he ordered. "Phase 2 begins now." Across human space, the Resistance shifted tactics. Now they began targeting Imperial supply lines, communication relays, and repair facilities. The Empire's greatest strength, its unified command structure, became its greatest weakness. Without orders from above, Imperial captains didn't know how to adapt. "This is impossible," Rex muttered as another report of losses came in. "They're savages, primitives. How are they doing this?" The answer came in a transmission from a human resistance leader. "You thought we would fight you like soldiers. But humans? We fight like survivors. Every one of us knows how to think independently, how to find weaknesses, how to make you bleed. You wanted war. Welcome to human warfare." As the first week of fighting ended, the Empire had lost 200 ships, not to grand battles or heroic last stands, but to an endless series of small attacks that never gave them a chance to use their superior numbers and technology. The Empire was learning a harsh lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest guns, but the one with the most ways to fight. Captain Thomas Ward sat in the cockpit of what used to be a deep-sea fishing boat. Now it was a makeshift warship, armed with salvaged weapons and covered in heat-absorbing paint. His crew of 15 were all fishermen 2 weeks ago. Today, they were about to take on an Imperial patrol ship. "Remember what makes us different," he told his crew over the intercom. "They follow orders. We solve problems." The Imperial patrol ship was massive compared to their vessel, but Thomas had spent 30 years navigating Earth's stormy seas. Space wasn't so different. It was all about understanding currents and timing. "They're scanning for engine signatures," his sensor operator reported. "Standard Imperial search pattern." Thomas smiled. "Then let's give them something they've never seen before." Release the nets. Space around their ship filled with thousands of tiny metal fragments, pieces of broken satellites and space debris they collected. To Imperial scanners, it looked like a cloud of random space junk, the perfect hiding spot. Across the solar system, humans were fighting the same way, using their environment and experience in ways the Empire never expected. In the asteroid belt, mining engineer turned squadron leader Robert Mason watched his radar screen. His team had spent days hollowing out several asteroids, turning them into hidden bases and trap-filled mazes. "Imperial cruiser approaching," his second-in-command reported. "They're following the transponder signal we planted." "Wait for it," Robert said calmly. When the massive Imperial ship passed between 2 asteroids, he pressed a button. Hidden thrusters fired, sending the asteroids slowly moving together. The Empire's mighty warship found itself being crushed between 2 space rocks, its shields useless against the natural force of gravity. Back on Earth, in the Amazon rainforest, Lieutenant Maria Torres led her team through the dense undergrowth. Above them, Imperial dropships searched for human resistance camps, their sensors confused by the thick canopy and the thousands of life forms moving below. "They still think we need cities to survive," Maria whispered to her team. "They don't understand that humans learned to live everywhere on Earth long before we had technology." Her team had spent weeks setting up electronic decoys that mimicked human settlements. Every time the Empire found one, they wasted time and resources attacking empty jungle, while real resistance bases moved freely through their blind spots. In orbit, Thomas Ward's converted fishing boat drifted with its cloud of debris, completely invisible to Imperial scans. They were now perfectly positioned above the patrol ship. "All hands ready," he ordered. "Remember your training." His crew had practiced this move hundreds of times in the rough seas of Earth's oceans. Now they used that experience in space, firing grappling hooks into the Imperial ship's hull. Before the Empire could react, Thomas's crew was cutting through their armor using tools designed for breaking down whale carcasses. "How?" the Imperial captain demanded as alarms blared through his ship. "How are they beating our sensors with such primitive technology?" The answer came as Thomas's crew breached their hull. Humans didn't rely on technology alone. They used their minds, their experience, and anything they could find as weapons. On Mars, former construction workers collapsed entire Imperial bases into sinkholes they had carefully prepared. On Venus, weather forecasters guided resistance ships through storms that ripped Imperial vessels apart. In the Kuiper Belt, ice miners used their knowledge of frozen gases to freeze Imperial ships solid. Admiral Stone received the day's reports with satisfaction. The Empire had lost another 30 ships, not to superior firepower, but to human ingenuity. Fishermen, farmers, miners, and teachers were proving more dangerous than any professional army. "Send today's footage to all resistance cells," he ordered. "Let everyone see how their fellow humans are fighting back. Innovation breeds innovation." As he watched the screens showing humans turning their everyday skills into weapons of war, Stone remembered his warning to the Empire. "We're chaos incarnate." They should have listened. The Imperial War Council chamber had never been so tense. High Commander Rex stood before the gathered admirals, his silver skin now dull with stress. On the massive screens behind him, footage played of another Imperial defeat. This time, a mighty battleship being taken down by what appeared to be converted Earth garbage collection vessels. "This is unacceptable," shouted Admiral First Class Max, slamming his fist on the table. "How are these primitives defeating our best ships?" Lieutenant Commander Drake, one of the younger officers, stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, maybe we should try to understand their tactics instead of just calling them primitives." "Silence," Rex roared. "We do not change our ways. The Empire has conquered thousands of worlds using our superior tactics. These humans will break like all the others." But Drake wasn't alone. Other young officers had been watching the humans closely, learning from their defeats. They saw something the older commanders refused to acknowledge: a better way of fighting. Meanwhile, on the human command ship Thunder, Admiral Stone watched the Empire's internal communications with satisfaction. His cyber warfare teams had been busy spreading videos of Imperial defeats throughout their network. "Send the next package," he ordered. "Let's show their crews what happened to that patrol fleet near Jupiter." The footage spread through the Imperial fleet like wildfire. Earth ships using Jupiter's massive gravity to slingshot themselves at impossible speeds, tearing apart Imperial formations. The humans had turned the solar system itself into a weapon. Back in the Imperial fleet, Drake watched these videos in secret with a growing group of younger officers. "Look at how they adapt," he whispered. "Each human ship fights differently. They're not bound by rigid rules." "But our doctrine has worked for 10,000 years, another officer argued. "Against enemies who fought like us," Drake replied. "The humans don't fight like anyone we've ever seen." The division in the Imperial ranks grew deeper. Young officers began questioning orders, suggesting different tactics, even trying to copy human techniques. The old guard responded with harsh discipline, but this only made things worse. Admiral Stone received word of the growing chaos through his spies. "Now we push harder," he told his staff. "Send the footage of our asteroid belt victory to every Imperial ship." The video showed how human forces had turned the entire asteroid belt into a complex trap, using simple mining charges to launch thousands of rocks at Imperial ships. The Empire's mighty warships had been defeated by rocks and clever timing. In his quarters, High Commander Rex watched his fleet falling apart. Half his officers wanted to adapt to human tactics, while the other half demanded even stricter adherence to Imperial doctrine. Ships were refusing to follow orders, arguing about tactics in the middle of battle. "Sir," his aide reported, "3 more ships have broken formation. Their captains say they won't follow suicide orders anymore." "Suicide orders?" Rex turned, his face twisted with rage. "Following Imperial doctrine is what made us great." "But sir," the aide dared to argue, "we've lost more ships in 1 month fighting humans than we lost in the last century of conquests." On Earth, Admiral Stone prepared the next phase of his psychological warfare. "Send them the mining colony footage," he ordered. "Show them what happened when they tried to take Mars." The video spread through the Imperial fleet. Human miners in simple mechanical suits swarming over Imperial ships like ants, cutting through hulls with mining tools, disabling mighty warships with simple industrial equipment. The Empire's greatest strength had always been its unity, its rigid discipline, its unchanging tactics. But against the chaos and creativity of human warfare, these strengths had become weaknesses. Their fleet was splitting apart, not from human attacks, but from within. As Drake watched another Imperial ship break formation to try a human-style attack, he realized something important. The humans weren't just defeating the Empire's ships, they were destroying its very foundation of unquestioning obedience. Operation Thunderstrike began at exactly midnight Earth time. Across the solar system, every human ship, base and fighter launched into action at once. To the Empire, it looked like complete chaos. To Admiral Stone, it was a perfect dance. "All units, execute your chosen tactics," he broadcast. "Remember, you know your area better than anyone. Fight your way." In the rings of Saturn, 300 converted mining ships burst out of hiding. They had spent weeks collecting ice and rock, turning Saturn's rings into a weapon. Now they used magnetic pulses to launch thousands of frozen projectiles at the Imperial fleet. High Commander Rex watched in horror as his neat formations broke apart, trying to dodge the endless storm of ice and rock. "Maintain formation," he shouted. "Follow standard doctrine." But his ships were too busy surviving to listen. Some captains tried to keep formation and were torn apart by the ice storm. Others broke ranks and survived, leading to even more confusion. Near Mercury, Captain Thomas Ward led his fleet of fishing boats turned warships in a complex weaving pattern through Imperial lines. They trailed special carbon fiber nets behind them, tangling Imperial ships together. The more the mighty warships struggled, the more entangled they became. "This is madness," Rex screamed as reports flooded in. "They're attacking everywhere at once. There's no pattern, no strategy we can counter." But he was wrong. There was a strategy. It was just too chaotic for the Empire to understand. Lieutenant Commander Drake watched from his ship as human vessels seemed to dance through space, each one moving differently yet somehow working together. They're not following any single plan, he realized. They're all improvising, but with the same goal. It's like a swarm of bees, each one acting alone but part of a greater whole. The Empire had always fought like a single fist, powerful but predictable. Humans fought like 1,000 tiny cuts coming from every direction at once. On Mars, mining crews detonated underground charges in careful sequences, creating waves of artificial moonquakes. Imperial ground forces found themselves fighting the planet itself as the ground buckled and shifted under their feet. In Earth orbit, civilian space stations suddenly revealed hidden weapons, catching Imperial ships in crossfire. Passenger ships turned into bombers, cargo containers exploded into clouds of deadly shrapnel, and space debris began moving in impossible ways, guided by hidden thrusters. "Sir," Rex's aide reported, his voice shaking, "we've lost contact with 30% of the fleet. Another 40% are reporting severe damage." The humans, they're everywhere, using everything as a weapon. Rex stared at his tactical display, trying to find a pattern he could counter. But there was no pattern. Each human force fought differently, using their local environment and specific skills. There was no central command to disrupt, no supply lines to cut, no key positions to take. Admiral Stone watched the battle unfold from the thunder. Unlike Rex, he saw the beautiful chaos of humanity at work. Fishermen using their knowledge of nets and currents, miners turning asteroids into weapons, construction workers collapsing ground under Imperial forces, each human fighting their own way, but contributing to the greater victory. "Sir," Officer Wells reported, "the Imperial fleet is falling apart. Some ships are retreating, others are fighting each other. They've completely lost coherence as a fighting force." Stone nodded. "Send the final message to all Imperial ships." Across every Imperial communication channel, human forces broadcast the same words. "This is humanity. We warned you to run. We showed you what we could do. You chose not to listen. The Empire's mistake was thinking that unity meant strength. But real strength is 1,000,000 different people finding 1,000,000 different ways to defeat you." As the message played, the Empire's mighty fleet broke apart completely. Some ships fled, others surrendered, and some tried to keep fighting, each captain making their own choice, finally learning to think for themselves. But it was too late. The Empire had just learned why humans had warned them to run. The peace conference took place on neutral ground, a space station positioned halfway between Earth and the remaining Imperial fleet. Admiral Stone sat at one end of the long table, while the Empire's new representative, Lieutenant Commander Drake, sat at the other. The old Imperial leadership had been removed after their catastrophic defeat. "Before we begin," Drake said, his voice heavy with curiosity, "I must know, how much of your military force did you actually use against us?" Stone smiled slightly. "Would you like to see?" He pressed a button, and the station's windows suddenly cleared, revealing what had been hidden behind their tinted surface. Thousands of ships hung in space around them, massive warships that humanity had kept in reserve, weapons platforms that had never been activated, entire fleets that had remained hidden throughout the war. Drake's silver skin paled. But you beat us with fishing boats and mining ships. Why didn't you use these?" "Because we wanted to teach you a lesson," Stone replied. "One that the Empire needs to learn if we're going to have peace." He stood and walked to the window. "We could have destroyed your fleet in the first battle, but that wouldn't have changed anything. You would have just seen us as another powerful enemy to fear. Instead," he continued, "we showed you something more important. We showed you that strength isn't about having the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. It's about creativity, adaptability, and the power of independent thinking." Drake nodded slowly. "The way your people fought. Each unit different, each strategy unique, but somehow all working together. How is that possible without central control?" Stone turned back to the table. "Because humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Not against aliens, but against ourselves. We learned the hard way that rigid doctrine gets you killed. Every war taught us to adapt, to think independently, to use whatever we had as a weapon." He activated a holographic display showing Earth's history of warfare. "See these battles. In each one, the side that adapted faster won. The ones who stuck to old doctrines lost. We took those lessons and built them into everything we do." "But surely you must have some central strategy," Drake asked. "Our strategy is simple. We train every human to think for themselves, to solve problems their own way. When you attacked us, you weren't fighting one military force. You were fighting billions of problem solvers, each one looking at the war differently, each one finding new ways to defeat you." Drake looked out at the massive human fleet again. "And these ships. Those represent what humanity can do when we work together. But true strength." Stone gestured to a small fishing boat floating nearby, now famous for capturing an Imperial cruiser. "True strength is being able to win even without them." The peace treaty was signed within hours. The Empire would recognize human space as independent territory, and in return, humanity would share their knowledge, not their weapons or ships, but something more valuable, their way of thinking. As Drake prepared to leave, Stone handed him one final data chip. "What's this?" Drake asked. "Footage from every battle of the war, from every perspective. Let it serve as a reminder to the Empire, and a warning to anyone else who might think of humans as easy prey." Drake took the chip carefully. "What should I tell the Empire's leaders?" Stone's expression turned serious. "Tell them that humans didn't become strong by conquering others. We became strong by learning from our mistakes, by thinking independently, by turning our chaos into strength. Tell them that if they ever think of attacking Earth again, what they saw in this war was just a small demonstration of what humanity can do." As Drake's ship departed, Officer Wells joined Stone at the window. "Do you think they really learned their lesson, sir?" Stone watched the Imperial ship disappear into faster-than-light travel. "They'd better hope so, because next time, we won't hold back." The war was over, but its lesson would echo across the galaxy. Never underestimate humans. They had warned the Empire to run. Next time, maybe their enemies would listen.